Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as we do every Thursday, we're joined by a brand new guest talking about their life and their journey throughout the world of martial arts. My guest today has been involved in martial arts for over 30 years, studying numerous styles, which I'm sure we'll get into each and every one of those throughout the show today. He's currently the producer and co-host of the Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio podcast, and for his day job, he's New England's only full-time bagpipe band drumming instructor. Definitely curious about that one. Please welcome to the show, Andrew Adams. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm great, Brian. How are you?
Good. I think you're only the second bagpipe player I've ever met in my life, so that's kind of cool.
And I don't actually play bagpipes, really. I'm a drumming instructor.
Okay, interesting. So what specific type of drums, or? So
whenever you see a bagpipe band marching on the street, usually that's where people see them marching in a parade. There'll be a bunch of bagpipers in the front, and everybody sees them, and they're the ones that get all the glory because they're bagpipes. Woo! But marching behind those bagpipers are going to be some drummers. Oh, okay. And my full-time job is teaching that style of drumming.
Okay. Is that like the same type of drumming you'd see in like a high school marching band, or is it different?
It's along the same vein, but it is different.
Okay, cool. Interesting. I saw that and I was like, that's really, really interesting. So I'll check out some videos. You'll have to send me a video sometime. I'd be curious to see that. So I
absolutely will do that.
Cool. Well, as you know, I know you've heard the show because we had Jeremy on the show before, but so kind of know where we start things out. We want to learn about that first spark, that first interest. What led to that first interest in martial arts?
Sure. Yeah, I was 13, I think. Okay. I was a freshman in high school, and my mom had just gotten out of a bad marriage, and she and myself and my older brother moved to a new area, new part of the state, and I felt this need to protect my mom. Okay. And my brother was going to be going off to college. He was going to be a freshman. He was a freshman in college. I was a freshman in high school, so it was just my mom and I at home, and I just felt this desire that I want to protect my mom. And I said to her, I want to learn martial arts. And she said, okay, but you got to do the legwork. So I was like, well, internet wasn't really a big thing then, so I did what kids do to look stuff up, is I went to the Yellow Pages, and I just looked up martial arts.
Okay, and so you let your fingers do the walking.
I let my fingers do the walking, and I went to my mom with the Yellow Pages and said, here's a place I want to go there. And she said, okay, the phone's right there. You give him a call. And so she made me... I think she figured if this was something that he really wants to do, then he's going to have to do the legwork to make it happen. Okay. And so I called, and of course, it was, I don't remember what time of day it was or what day it was, but they weren't open. And so I remember calling, and the answering machine picked up, and I immediately hung up because I was like, I don't know what to do. And so she's like, well, you got to, leave a message. And I was like, well, what do I say? So, but that was how I found my first martial arts school.
So I'm curious then, in the Yellow Pages, first of all, now what area of the country was this in, and how many schools were there in the Yellow Pages, and what made you pick that one?
So the area was in White River Junction, Vermont. So right on the New Hampshire border, right kind of the center of the state. I don't remember how many I saw in the Yellow Pages, although growing up in that area and having started, I know there were at least 2 other schools in the area. Okay. What drew me to that one, I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
I don't remember what it was.
Or?
Yep, it was Goju-Ryu. Oh, although cool. they were called Kaju Kempo.
Okay.
And they changed their name shortly after I started training, but when I started, I was told the KA was for karate, and they trained Goju-Ryu and Shotokan.
Oh.
And the JU was for judo and jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
And the Kempo was a Chinese-style Kempo.
Wow.
And so I remember for my first rank test, I had to do Sanchin, which would be from the Goju side, and Heian Shodan from the Shotokan side.
Yep, I remember that one. Okay. Wow. Interesting. So then thinking back, you called them, you left a message, whatever, and you decided to go to, think about that first time you walked in, and did you watch a first class or did you jump right in?
I went right in. I wanted to take part in class. I didn't want to watch.
Okay.
And so I walked in and I was in awe because, I'm a 13-year-old kid.
Right.
I mean, I enjoyed all stuff martial arts, even though I didn't know what martial arts was. Mm-hmm. But, I had seen, the Karate Kid movies and, or the ones that had come out at that point.
Yep. And
so I knew about martial arts. And I walked in and all of a sudden, like, these people wearing these white pajamas and there's different colored belts and, the instructor comes up and was incredibly personable and very, very friendly. And I immediately thought to myself, this is where I want to be.
Oh, cool. Talk just a little bit about those first few classes. What are some of the things you remember like doing in class and the first few things you learned maybe?
So, I remember learning kata. I just remember being enamored with the instructor. He was just such a... And looking back on it now, I definitely felt like he was someone that would be a father figure to me, okay. though he never... obviously he never was.
Yeah.
But he was someone that I looked up to as a role model and was just someone that I wanted to be around. And I don't remember those specific classes per se, but I do remember as a kid doing kata in my shower.
In your shower?
That was...
Really?
Yeah, because I was told I need to practice every day.
Okay.
And I remember at one point he said, you need to find something that you do every day and do it like that. And I'm like, well, I shower every day, so I guess I'll practice my kata in the shower. And It was fine when I first started because I only had 1 or 2 kata to do.
Yep.
And obviously, for the listeners, like, I'm not doing these low, deep stances in the shower.
That's what I was wondering. Okay.
No. No.
Like, you have really big shower.
No. It was a regular bathtub shower. Okay. And I would just do little movements and, little, very small, low blocks and then rising blocks and everything. And, when I first started out, it was fine. But as I got progressing through the ranks and I had more and more kata, my mom would be like, why are your showers taking so long? Because I'm going through all my kata.
That's awesome. Wow. See, my mom used to get mad when I first joined. When I was 10 years old, I didn't practice much at home when I started martial arts. But when I was in high school and started practicing, I remember she came home one time and I had like the couch all moved at like to one side of the room and chairs moved. And I turned the living room into my dojo. I was like, what the hell are you doing?
Yep, absolutely.
That's awesome.
So that was my first school, and it wasn't too long after I had started training that my instructor broke from the organization that he was a part of, and he cut the curriculum down quite a bit, and it became strictly, karate-wise, it was just a Goju-Ryu school.
Okay.
And it was a traditional Goju-Ryu karate school, so we still did, wrist locks and, some jiu-jitsu and falling and some judo and ukemi and stuff like that. But it was, primarily a Goju-Ryu school.
Okay. And how long did you stay at that school?
All the way through high school and into college.
Wow.
So probably about 5 or 6 years. Because I started as a freshman. Mm-hmm. And when I went off to college, I would come home on school vacations and summer break and stuff, and I would go back to training.
Okay. And what rank did you get through that instructor then?
EQ.
Okay.
So brown belt just before my next test would have been Shodan, would have been black belt.
Okay. And do you regret not going for black belt with that instructor? Or?
You know what? I do. I absolutely do. And I stopped training because, at that point I had moved out of my house. I was living on my own, and I had to pay all my own, pay my own way for everything. Mm-hmm. And it just became financially not something I could keep up with.
Okay. And
I definitely regret not staying there. However, years later, I did reconnect with my first instructor.
Oh, very cool. So then that first 5-6 years you did that. Now, did you get into teaching at all at that time? And did you get into competition at all?
I did not get into any teaching.
Okay.
Not teaching in the sense of, you're in charge of running this class.
Right.
But, it might be small little things like take this one person off there and just help him work this kata.
Okay.
For 10 minutes during class. But it wasn't any formal set of teaching.
Okay.
And competition, we were not a competition school. I went to maybe three tournaments as a kid.
Okay.
It wasn't, in my whole 6 years, I think I went to 3 tournaments.
So was that something you enjoyed? Do you remember doing?
I do remember enjoying it. The one funny story I remember is I was probably 15 or 16, and I got second place in my kata division.
Okay.
For my age group. And the trophy that handed to me, it had the statue on top was a girl.
Really?
Yep. And I was, it's dumb now because who really cares, right? But I was like, oh man, this really sucks. Like, I got a trophy, it's got a girl on it. Like, what a dumb thing for a kid to think, right? But I remember going around and finding a girl that got second place in their division and traded trophies with her. Because awesome. It didn't say like what division you won. It just said second place kata this tournament. And so I went to probably an older girl who won second, but her trophy had a guy, and so we ended up switching trophies. That's
awesome. Now, did you only compete in kata, or did you compete in anything else?
I never and even to this day, I'm not a person that enjoys kumite, sparring. I do it and I see that there's value in it, but it's not something I really enjoy.
Okay.
So when I was competing as a kid, it was kata and it was kobudo, so weapons and forms.
Okay, very cool. Well, and what was your weapon of choice?
I remember doing kama. That was the only. We in our school we started with bow and then moved to kama.
Okay.
And so I remember doing my weapons kata was with kama. Although I was enamored with the sai. That was the weapon that I really wanted to do because, Raphael.
I was just going to ask, around the 90s, it had to be Ninja Turtles.
Oh, absolutely.
That's awesome. Actually, one of the first martial arts tournaments I went to in the early 90s, I actually got to meet, it was either Raphael or Donatello, the guy who was in the suit doing the stunts. Was at the Diamond Nationals tournament in Minneapolis. They had like 2 or 3 of the Ninja Turtles were there, and some of the Mortal Kombat guys we got to meet. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, and he's always been my favorite, and it's kind of funny because you mentioned earlier Jeremy has been on the show. Mm-hmm. His favorite turtle was also Raphael.
Nice.
And he has a photo of himself as a child dressed up as Raphael.
Yeah.
And I have a photo of myself as an adult dressed up as Raphael.
That's awesome. That should be like the picture of the podcast, you guys. Come on. That could be cool. That could be cool. All right. So then what was next in your martial arts journey? What came after that? You said you stopped for a while. How long did you stop for?
I did. Yeah, I stopped training because I ended up moving away as well, about a couple hours north. I actually took a position teaching at a high school.
Oh.
And, moved a couple hours away from White River Junction. So, it didn't make sense for me to still be in the school.
Right.
In that dojo. And it was a number of years later that I read a statistic, and I don't know if this statistic is true, but the statistic read that 80% of people who get to brown belt never get their black belt.
Wow. I could see that.
And like I said, that might be completely false.
Yeah.
I have no idea if it's true or not. But I read that and said, I don't want that to be me.
Okay.
So I was living in St. Johnsbury, Vermont, northern Vermont, and I started looking around for a martial arts school in the area. It didn't have to be Goju-Ryu, although that would have been great.
Yeah.
But there were no Goju-Ryu schools in the area, but there was a Shotokan club.
Okay.
So I called him up. This time I had no problems leaving a message. And when I finally got him on the phone, he said, come on by, check out a class. And the thing that really did it for me was he said, if this is not what you're looking for, that's totally fine. Let me know and I will be more than happy to help you find a place that fits what you're looking for.
Oh, very cool. That's a good instructor.
Absolutely.
Okay. So then what was it what drew you to that one? Once you got there, what made you want to stay? What made you think it was the one you were looking for?
Again, it was the instructor, and it was, everybody talks about that this style is what's for them, or this style is what's for them. And I'm not a big style guy. I mean, yes, I'm going to talk about these quote unquote styles that I've done, but there's no such thing as a best style. If there was, everybody would be doing that one style, and some styles people gravitate towards, and that's great. But for me, it's the instructor, at least when I was first starting out. And so this guy, again, was very personable, very funny. He respected the fact that I had rank in another system. I certainly went in and said I'm more than happy to wear a white belt because I don't care about rank either. Mm-hmm. And he said, no, you got a brown belt, wear your brown belt. And he said, what we'll do is you'll learn our curriculum, and when you're ready, you will retest for brown belt.
Okay.
And I was like, all right, that's fine, whatever. Like, I'm not in any rush for it. So, I was there for a few years, learning all of their new, all of their kata, because for me they were new. I think I had known Heian Shodan or Heian Nidan from when I had done Shotokan very briefly before my old school had dropped it. But, I had to learn all the rest of their kata up through their brown belt stuff. So it was a couple of years, and then I tested for brown belt, and then went on later. And I was with that school for about 16 years.
Oh, wow. How high did you get in rank in there?
Third degree black belt.
Okay.
And there was certainly a lot more teaching going on for me. I found when I became a high school teacher that teaching was just something that I really, really enjoyed.
Okay.
That I like imparting knowledge onto others, especially those that want to learn.
Right. And I have to ask, because I studied Shotokan when I was in high school also. And I remember the one thing that stood out when I first got there is it was the first school I had been to that actually had a traditional makiwara board. Did you guys have one of those?
We did not.
Oh, man.
my Goju-Ryu school did.
They did? Okay.
Yeah, my Goju-Ryu school had a makiwara with a canvas covering as opposed to actually wrapped with rope.
Yep.
But the Shotokan club that I went to practiced at a local VFW.
Okay.
And so we would go in and use their function room every week for class. Okay. So we didn't have a dedicated space to be able to put up a makiwara.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I miss Shotokan. I know when I came here to college, there was a Shotokan club at a local school, but it was a lot further away. And I ended up joining traditional Taekwondo when I started college because that was at my school and on campus. So it was convenient for me. So unfortunately, a lot of people, that happens a lot is convenience. So
absolutely.
I do actually. My original Shotokan instructor was one of my first guests on the podcast, so stayed in contact with them, and same with my original Tung Sudo instructor from back in 1984. So. Yep.
Yeah. And I had mentioned that I reconnected with my first instructor.
Yes.
Shortly after I got my Shodan, I went. The internet existed at that point, so I went online. I went online and found out how to contact him, and I called him up, and I told him just at this point I was in my late 20s, I think, and I told him you meant a lot to me as a kid, and I don't know how much you realize what you meant to me, and I would not have been able to do the martial arts that I had done without his initial training, and he seemed very touched, which was really good, and I actually went back and saw him a few times when I would go back and visit my mom because she still lives in that area,
right?
And so stayed connected with him, and it was really good to be able to kind of give him that feedback of how much he meant to me as a kid.
So was there ever a part of you that thought about trying to make it work to go back and get your black belt through him?
No, it was just too far away.
Okay.
I mean, I was like 2 to 2.5 hours away.
Yeah, that's rough. Okay. Now I know you said to hear some other styles you've done too. You've done some Shorin-ryu. How did that? When did that start? How did that come about?
So I lived in St. Johnsbury, Vermont, studying Shotokan. I had gotten my second degree black belt. I was slated to take my third degree test in about a year when I got engaged. Ended up getting married, and my wife, fiance at the time, and I moved to Cape Cod, which is about 5 to 6 hours from St. Johnsbury, Vermont. Okay. So all of a sudden, it's like, oh man, I was supposed to test for third degree, and again, I'm not big into rank, but it was like this cool thing that's like, this would be really fun, and And I was a little bummed, but then I found out, when I told my instructor that I was moving to Cape Cod to be with my fiance, he said, well, where are you moving? And I told him, and he said, oh, there's a fourth degree black belt from the school that lives down there. He hasn't, he doesn't train with us anymore, but he did for many, many years. He has a fourth degree black belt. Why don't you connect with him? And so I moved to the Cape and trained with this gentleman for a year, and then he and I went back to St. Johnsbury to test for my third Dan.
Oh, very cool. So it was just pretty much just one-on-one training for a year?
Yeah. Just he and I would get together, a couple times a month. At that point, there wasn't a lot for me to learn, per se. I mean, a couple of new kata, but, I was already a second degree black belt. I mean, I knew the techniques that I needed to do. I mean, I knew all the basics. It was just a matter of learning a few new kata, working on some other sparring stuff and whatnot. So it wasn't a huge thing. But shortly after getting that, passing that rank, my wife ended up getting a position elsewhere in the States. So we ended up moving again. So, there goes my training. Can't train anymore. And so we moved to an hour or so south of where I had been living in White River Junction. And I didn't train for a number of years because I was really busy.
Okay.
I started, teaching drumming full-time at that point. I was traveling all over New England most evenings teaching.
Wow.
And I just didn't have the time for training.
Okay. So how long of a break was that?
About 6 or 7 years.
Okay. And what made you, did you just missed it? What made you go back?
Yeah, I always, whenever I wasn't training, I always felt like something was missing. And my wife and I at the time decided to part ways very, very amicably. But it's still a hard thing to do.
Right.
And so I moved further south into the state, into Brattleboro, Vermont, where a very good friend of mine was training at a Shorin-ryu dojo. And I said, you know what, I really miss this, and I'm recognizing that I'm maybe getting a little depressed. Even though my divorce was very amicable, it's still a hard thing to go through, and I felt a little depressed, and I said, you know what, I need to get out of this funk. I have a very good friend. She's training at this Shorin-ryu school right here in Brattleboro. I'm going to go check it out. And so I started training at the school that I'm now still currently at.
Okay, and how long have you been there now?
Oh, man, all these math questions. You keep asking me these math questions.
Carry the
Brian.
2.
I think 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah, about 7 years now at this point.
Nice. And what rank do you hold on Shorin-ryu?
Second degree.
Okay.
Black belt. Nice. So, again, the instructor, incredibly understanding that I came in with rank. Again, I offered to wear a white belt, and he said, nope, you earned that black belt. Like, I can't take it away from you. So I would never ask you to not wear, a black belt. And so I, started going to classes every week and had been there about 4 months or so. And he did, I think, one of the coolest belt things I've ever seen somebody do for someone coming in with rank. There was a test, no one going for any real big rank, but just, a bunch of under Q ranks. And he and his instructor invited me to sit up with the two of them to sit on the board for this test. And, I was honored. That was great. No problem. Because I'm wearing a black belt. So they had me set up with the two of them, and they administered this test. And, I took notes on some students and whatnot. And there were kids doing the test that didn't know who I was because I only showed up for the adult class. And there were also adults. And at the end of the test, everybody lines up. And he calls each student up one at a time and gives them their rank. And he called the last student up, gave him his rank, and then the student went back in line. And then he said, there's one person that I haven't called up yet. And I'm thinking, you called up every person that's here. What's going on? And he asked me to stand in front of him. And I was like, okay. So I stood in front of him, and he gave a short speech to the students there, mostly for the kids, because the kids didn't know who I was. But he said, I want to make it very clear that Andrew is a black belt. He earned this black belt, and I would never ask him to not wear a black belt in this school. However, I would ask if Andrew would be willing to take his belt off. And at the time, I had my Shotokan black belt, had my name embroidered on it. It says Shotokan, got 3 stripes. And so I said, of course, I took the belt off. And he pulled out a plain black belt with nothing on it. And he said, I want to make it very clear to everyone here that I am not promoting Andrew to black belt. He is already a black belt. But I'm asking if he would be willing to wear this belt instead. Which, of course, I have no problem doing that.
That's cool.
So he gave me this black belt, and I put it on. And he, again, reiterated to the class, again, I did not promote Andrew to black belt. However, in our school, I'm promoting him to green belt. And so he took out green tape, and he put 1 green stripe on the end of my black belt. So I was to be treated like a black belt, but within the school, officially, I was a green belt.
That's cool.
And I thought that was a really cool way to recognize someone who came in with existing rank, but still show within the curriculum, this is where they are. Because to me, rank doesn't really matter. I mean, it doesn't matter in terms of trying to compare one black belt in this school to one black belt in another school. Of course, they're not going to be equal. I don't care what those schools are. Even if they're within the same organization, they may not be the same. All that rank is for is to show where they are with the curriculum that they currently have in their school. So I was to be treated like a black belt, but I knew the curriculum for green belt.
That's really, really cool. I mean, that's kind of, this question is kind of popping in my head. Obviously, you got lucky with like 3 instructors. What are the similar qualities of each of those instructors that, I mean, obviously you were drawn to each of them for a reason. Is there something similar you can pick out maybe from each of them that's kind of the same?
It's interesting because in a lot of ways, all 3 of them were very different. But I think the biggest thing is that I could tell right away that all 3 of them were open-minded people that were humble, that not one of them came off with any ounce of arrogance whatsoever. And as a child, I picked that up very quickly with my Goju-Ryu instructor.
Okay.
As an adult, I went to my Shotokan instructor, and he said, if this isn't what you want, that's totally fine. I will be more than happy to help direct you to a place that might be a better fit. That's incredible. For an instructor to say, and understand and recognize that I am not everybody's cup of tea, and that is okay. So, and then, with my current instructor, the same thing, like very open, very humble, willing to let somebody come in and, with rank and respect that rank. I think that meant a lot.
That's cool. I know I've been lucky too. I've had 1 bad instructor in 38 years of martial arts. I've only had 1 that I call my Mr. Crease, instructor. So, but yeah, I'm this, and I'm kind of the same way. When people come into the school I go to and stuff, and they ask questions, if I honestly think it won't be a fit, I've had other instructors call me up and be like, did you send a student to my school? I'm like, yeah, that was more of what they were looking for. I'm like, oh, thank you. They're kind of shocked that I would do that. I'm like, I don't want someone here. We don't want someone here who doesn't want to be here. I want someone to love martial arts like I do. That's cool.
Yep. I agree wholeheartedly. So I've been with this school since then. I didn't actually test for green belt. He just gave me rank because I'd been there 3 months. I knew the basics and whatnot. And then I officially tested. My next test was for EQ, which would be the rank right before black belt. So I went from green belt straight to brown belt.
Okay.
And he put brown tape on the end of my black belt.
Nice.
And then my friend that I had started training, that she had already been at the school, she and I tested for our Shodan together, which was really nice.
That's awesome. That's just such a cool story. So I'm kind of curious. I never got to ask Jeremy this, but how did you meet Jeremy? I'd love to hear that story.
So, as we talked about earlier, I teach drumming for a living, specifically to bagpipe bands. And I had been listening to the Whistlekick martial arts radio for, at that point, a couple of years, maybe a year.
Okay.
And there was a guest on that talked about if you're going to do something, if you're going to learn something, whether it's martial arts or anything, you should endeavor to learn from the best. And you might not be able to, whether it's financially or logistically, you might not be able to learn from the best, but you should endeavor to do that. And I had in my head this idea of, I would really like to start a podcast about bagpipe band, not necessarily drumming, but just, interviewing pipers and drummers from around the world. And I have been in the pipe band world long enough that, most of the top people in the world are people that I can call on the phone and say hello to, and they'll accept my call because they know me. So I thought, you know what, I'm listening to Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio. They interview these people. I could run a podcast kind of the same, but just instead of with martial artists, with top-level bagpipers and drummers. And maybe I want to do a podcast. So I emailed Jeremy out of the blue and said, hey, I want to learn about podcasting. I know nothing about it, but I listen to your show and I enjoy it. So I would love if you would be open to it, to meet and talk about it. And he said, sure. He wrote me back, sent me an email back and said, yeah, I'm happy to chat with you on the phone about it. And I said, no, you are only 2 hours away from me. I will drive to you. I'll drive 2 hours to your place, or not. I didn't go to his house, but we met, downtown Montpelier, Vermont, and sat down and we just talked about podcasting and how it works, and I literally knew nothing.
Okay.
And so that's how I first got connected to him as a person. And he needed some help with the Facebook page. And so I helped out just moderating and being admin on the page. Okay. And there was an email that got sent out at one point that they were looking for podcast guests. There had been an issue. The only time the show ever failed to put out an episode was when he had been recording, and this was pre-me. Yep. But he had been recording on Skype, and Skype had recorded everything, but it had recorded everything blank. Ooh. And he had recorded 4 or 5 episodes that day. Ouch. And all of a sudden, oh shoot. He's like, I need to get guests quickly so that, we don't have 5 weeks of no guest. Mm-hmm. And so the producer at the time, they had put out this email saying, if anyone's interested in coming on, and I wrote and said, I don't know if my story's any good, but I guess if you want to interview me, I guess I'll come on. And so he interviewed me for an episode, and we just stayed connected. I went to an event that Whistlekick ran, and later on they put out Jeremy put out an email saying, I'm thinking about maybe getting a co-host. If you guys can think of anybody, or what do you guys think of that? And the email was sent to Patreon subscribers. That's right. Okay. And so, only a select few people got this email. And I emailed Jeremy and said, hey, I know that you have a ton of people that you could tag to be on your show as your co-host. Because at this point, he had done 500 or 600, 500 plus episodes. And I'm like, you know so many people in the martial arts world. You could probably get anybody you want as a co-host. But I would love to be considered for the position. And he wrote back and said, I'll be honest, Andrew, you were the one person I was thinking of when I wrote that email. But I didn't want to ask you directly. I wanted to see if you were really interested.
Nice.
And I've been the co-host of the show ever since. The producer ended up having to leave for some family issues and things going on. So I stepped up and took over and have been the producer and co-host ever since. It's been a couple of years now.
Nice. So then for maybe the listeners who don't know, on the inner and outgoings and everything of a podcast, what exactly does a producer do?
So I'm responsible for getting guests and having them booked, making sure that they have everything they need when they show up, keeping organized track of who's coming on when episodes are getting released, staying in contact with those guests before and after recording. When their episode comes out, I let them know, hey, it's coming out next week, things like that. Mm-hmm. And also as co-host, I'm also helping to come up with topic ideas for us to discuss because, we put out 2 podcasts a week. Yeah. We just released, as of this recording, we just released episode 719. Wow. We're putting out 2 a week. One is an interview and one is a topic-driven show. So we'll discuss some sort of topic in the martial arts. And with that many episodes, it can become difficult to figure out, what are we going to talk about this week?
one a week can be difficult. I can't imagine two.
Yeah.
Trust me.
It's quite a juggling act at times.
I'm only on 67, so.
But how many people are not at that?
True.
You know.
Oh, I know. That's like I said. It's less than. God, I remember reading the stats when it might have been more by now, but out of like the 2 million podcasts that have been out there, like 93% of them didn't go past 7 episodes. That's just a
and that doesn't
stat.
surprise me.
A lot of people try it, they do 1 or 2, and they're like, this is hard. I don't want to do it anymore. I knew going in I mean. I had a radio background. I had done syndicated radio. I knew what I was getting myself into. So, and I still chose to do it.
Yep. Yeah, and it's great. And you know, the philosophy that my Shotokan instructor had with martial arts is very similar to how, you know, I feel in regards to martial arts podcasts. That, you know, I listen to other martial art podcasts. I mean, yes, I'm the producer and co-host for Whistlekick, but I listen to your podcast every time it comes out. I listen to, I just picked up listening to another martial arts podcast called Conversations on Karate.
Yeah, that's a good one. I've listened to a few episodes of that one.
And like, I really enjoy that. And that's not to say that everybody has to listen to our podcast. Our goal is not that everybody listens to our podcast. Our goal is everybody trains.
Right.
And if there's another martial arts podcast that appeals to you, that is awesome. And so I love that we have that philosophy that there is a place for everyone in this world.
Yeah, I know. Because, I mean, when I got into radio years and years and back in the old days, I mean, if you had 2 similar shows, it was competition. I don't care how far apart they were. You know, they didn't help each other. They didn't care about each other. It's like, you know, it's just sharing information. I mean, you'd lose jobs for that back then. So I'm glad we're much more evolved at this point.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So this question, obviously, as we've been talking, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this one and what you're going to give. But advice for people looking for a martial arts school for the first time. What are some tips you'd give them on what to look for in a school and or an instructor, obviously, and some things to maybe avoid?
Well, for me, the biggest thing is, what's your rationale for training? What's your purpose? Is it for self-defense? Because if that's the case, you're not going to want to go to necessarily a competition-oriented school. You know, so trying to figure out what it is you're looking to get out of it is the first kind of questions I'd ask. But the biggest thing to look out, I don't say look out for, but the biggest things to look for is an instructor that you can relate to, that you can get along with and learn from, because the bad instructor can ruin it for you.
Right. And
even a mediocre instructor can be fine, but a bad instructor will be worse.
And it's I mean, like I said, some people you don't know. I mean, that's why my biggest tip is you never sign a long-term contract. I mean,
yeah, and I mean, I've heard that, and I have been very fortunate with the schools that I've trained at, and I recognize that. Mm-hmm. But being in the martial arts world in a bigger sense now that I'm with Whistlekick, I get the sense that those types of programs are few and far between at this point.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I mean, from 20 years ago, it was so hard to find a school without having to sign a long-term contract, and now it seems like most schools are getting away from that. I think they know they can't do it anymore.
I think people are recognizing that that's not the way to go.
Yep. Or even worse is like some of the schools that have what they call the black belt contract, where you sign the contract and we guarantee on this date you will get your black belt. In
exactly.
18 months or 2 years. I'm like, can't do that. Like, come on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and here's the reality. This you know, how long does it take the average person to get a black belt?
Asking me that question is different than asking someone else, I guess. But to me, it would depend on. Well, first of all, it depends on the person, but it also depends on the style. Because I know there's some.
No, the answer is the average person doesn't get a black belt.
Duh. I knew that one. Yes.
Sorry, I digress.
It's all good. It's all good. I've actually heard that before, and I walked into that one, so that was good. But.
You totally did.
Oh yeah. That's good. All right, so MMA and the UFC. What are your thoughts on that? Are you a fan? And obviously, I know you said you weren't really into competition, so probably something you would have never wanted to try when you were younger. But do you watch it? Are you a fan? And what are your thoughts on it?
So I want to correct one thing that you said. I am a fan of competition.
Okay.
I do enjoy competition. The school that I happened to be at as a kid didn't do a lot, but I really enjoyed the ones that I did do.
Okay.
I was not a fan of sparring per se, and I'm still not, but But I do enjoy competition. And in the drumming world, in the bagpipe band world, I'm very heavily involved in competition.
Oh, I suppose, yeah.
But in regards to UFC, when it first came out, I loved it. I was a huge fan. And, would watch them every time they come out. When it started to become pay-per-view, it became a little harder. Because I worked at a video store for a while, so I could get the VHS tapes and watch them that way. I am no longer a fan of the UFC I don't want to say I'm not a fan of MMA.
Right.
I have no problem with MMA. My problem is with the large commercial organizations like the UFC, although they're not the only game in town.
Right.
And I might even go so far as to say they promote bad behavior. Mm-hmm. That there are members of their community that do bad things and are bad people. And some will say, oh, no, that's not real. It's fake. Like WWE, it's a persona. Well, maybe it is, but they're okay with that persona. And right. I don't think people should be okay with that. And so I don't like what the UFC has become, but I like what it was when it started.
Agreed. I used to be diehard. I used to never miss an episode, and I probably haven't sat down and watched a full event in about 5 years. So
yeah. But a lot of amateur MMA stuff is amazing.
Yes.
And a lot of it, to me, comes down to, and I have not watched a lot of UFC lately because I started to notice this trend. But in the earlier days, I remember this happened a lot, and it was respect. Mm-hmm. The competitors would get in the ring, and they respected each other. And when they were in the ring fighting, yes, they were enemies. But when they got out of the ring, when they were done, they would shake each other's hand, or they would bow to each other, and they were fine.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen when it happens now. My understanding is it's very rare.
Very rare.
But when you saw people, and obviously we're stepping outside of UFC, but when Joe Louis and Bill Wallace got in the ring and fought each other, they were bitter enemies. But the minute that bell rang, they were the best of friends.
Yep.
And they had that mutual respect for each other. And I don't get the sense that happens in the UFC anymore. People legitimately hate each other. And the reality is, if you're stepping in the ring and someone is willing to give their body to you, you should respect that.
Yeah. So do you go to any local events? I mean, is it sanctioned where you are?
No. There are events of that nature here. There are amateur MMA events, that are within a few hours drive to me. It's not something that I've ever really done. Okay.
If you ever do find a local one that you don't have to drive too far, I guess, I don't know, maybe it's different, but I know I used to judge local ones, and I've judged probably 1,000 local amateur and pro fights, and some of those local ones are better fights than in the UFC. And there's some great ones, and we haven't had that many in the last few years. I mean, when COVID hit and stuff, and I think we've maybe had 3 sanctioned events in the last maybe 4 or 5 years. So locally, a little bit different, but yeah, same thing. I mean, it's kind of left a bitter taste in my mouth and kind of quit. I love how you mentioned Bill Wallace, Joe Louis. I really hope kickboxing makes a comeback. I know a few of my previous guests have talked about that. I know there's things being worked on. I would love to see kickboxing make a comeback because I used to love watching.
Time will tell.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. So, all right. So, who would you put on your Mount Rushmore of martial arts?
Oh boy. I mean, the obvious answer is my past instructors, but I would say I like the blending of the old and the new. So the old would be like Anko Itosu, Funakoshi, like some of those guys. But I really enjoy the stuff that Ian Abernathy is doing.
Oh yeah, yes.
And his practical karate stuff. I had the pleasure to take a seminar with him pre-COVID a number of years ago, and then I was actually in Scotland, at the World Pipe Band Championships, and my wife flew over towards the end of our stay, just before the World Championships, and we ended up staying for a week after, kind of as a honeymoon. And Ian's dojo is only a few hours south of Glasgow, and I had contacted him ahead of time, and on my honeymoon, my wife and I hopped into a car and drove down to his school, and so I got to train at his school, and nice. He was like, I can't believe you did this on your honeymoon. Like, your wife is amazing. And you know what? He was right.
That's cool. Yeah, he's actually hopefully a future guest. I know I talked to him back in April, and I know he's super, super busy and told me to get a hold of him in about 5 or 6 months, and he'd work it out. So hopefully have him on the show in a few months would be good. Super cool guy. So. Mm-hmm. All right, so obviously you've been traditional martial arts your whole career for over 30 years. What are one or two philosophies you've learned that are really important to you and you keep coming back to?
The ones that I have a couple actually, and they transcend just martial arts per se, but one of them is that slow and perfect is still perfect.
Nice. Fast
and wrong is still wrong. It doesn't matter. I use this quote in drumming quite a bit, but I find it holds a lot of value in martial arts as well. That if you can do something perfect, it doesn't matter how slow it is. Perfect is perfect. You can't get better than perfect.
That is true.
So that's one, and then another one is winners practice until they get it right. Champions practice until they can't get it wrong.
Nice. I like that. I've never heard that one before. That's good. Cool. I'm writing that one down. That's one thing I need. I've actually had that suggestion from some guests. I need to have a link on my website with some of the philosophies and stuff and like the books and all that, and just another project to add more time to my life. I guess I'll have to.
Yeah, because I'm sure you don't have enough.
Yeah, I know. I'll have to hire someone for that one. But so yeah, well, speaking of something to add to the list, favorite martial arts book.
I'm not a huge book guy.
Okay.
Now, that's not to say that I haven't read some. I'm a fan of the... Oh, gosh. It's going to escape me right now. Hang on. Let me turn and look at my books. Oh, Iron and Silk. Iron and Silk. And it's not strictly a martial arts book.
Okay.
It was I first got introduced to it as a movie, actually. And it was about a gentleman named Mark Salzman, who wrote a book by the same name. And it was about his travel to China in the 70s to become an English teacher, to teach English to some teachers in China who had been Russian teachers, but because of the break from communist China, they were now being forced to learn English. And he had studied Kung Fu here in the United States and then traveled over to China and wanted to learn Kung Fu over there. And it's a really interesting movie if you can find it. It's called Iron and Silk. And there definitely is martial arts through the movie because it's his journey trying to learn from one of the biggest martial arts, Kung Fu, Wushu instructors in China at the time, who was known as the Iron Fist of China.
Okay.
Because he would hit a metal plate with his hand 1,000 times a day.
Jeez.
And when he proposed making this, and he ended up, training with this gentleman, and when he wanted to have a movie made of his book, he had to get permission from the instructor to use his likeness. And this instructor, the Iron Fist of China, said, "You can use my likeness, however, no one is allowed to play me in the movie but me." Oh. And so it was actually him in the movie.
Wow.
Which is pretty cool.
I'm actually just reading. I'm marking it right now so I go back and find it and watch it later. So 1990 Canadian action comedy. Okay.
Yep.
Mark Salzman. Cool. Awesome. I marked that one down. I love that because I had so many books to my library since I started this show, and now to find time to
I'll
read
tell
them.
you, that book is a pretty easy read. I remember after I watched the movie, I got a copy of the book and read it, and it's not a long book. It's not a big book. It's not a hard read. But it was enjoyable. And the movie was obviously a little bit different. They portrayed the love interest a little bit differently in the movie than really happened in the book. But, they wanted to make it a movie. But it was really enjoyable.
All right. So obviously this one, kid of the 90s and 80s like me, favorite martial arts video game.
Oh, I was a fan of Tekken.
Nice.
And my favorite character was the drunken master guy.
Very cool. Okay.
Whose name eludes me.
God, I haven't played Tekken in over 20 years.
So the drunken Kung Fu guy was my favorite, and followed up closely by the capoeira guy.
Ah, yes.
Eddie? I think his name was Eddie.
Yeah, I think that's right. I liked it. Yeah, because I think that came out around the time I saw the movie Only the Strong, so I loved the capoeira guy.
Yep, absolutely.
Very cool. Okay. All right. Favorite martial arts TV show?
So there's not a ton to choose from. that are true like martial art TV shows. I mean, I did watch. I mean, it came out before my time, but obviously I've watched Kung Fu. Before you ask, yes, I watched The Legend Continues.
Did you actually like it or no?
I did because it was martial arts.
You're the only other guy I've met that actually liked it.
Well, so apparently, though, if you ask Jeremy, I have bad taste when it comes to that sort of stuff because he and I have a long-standing feud about the movie Best of the Best.
Love that movie.
So, shortly after I became co-host of the show, I had to come up with ideas for our Thursday episodes, and I suggested, why don't we review a movie? How about we do Best of the Best? And he said, okay, that's great. He had not seen the movie.
Really? Okay.
Yep. And I had seen it as a kid. I had seen it multiple times. I freaking love that movie.
Me too.
And so, I rewatched it again for our recording, and I showed up and we were doing it via Zoom at that point. So I started to mention something about it before the recording started. He said, no, hang on. Let's save it till the recording. Okay, sure. So we started the episode. He hated the movie. I mean, absolutely, positively, 1,000% hates that movie. Can't believe it got made. Has almost nothing good to say about it. Thinks James Earl Jones gave the worst performance of his life.
What?
And so it has become a thing with us in a very fun and funny way. But yeah, I almost decided to come up with T-shirts that said Team Andrew and Team Jeremy at one point.
I tell you, I just lost a little bit of respect for Jeremy.
Yeah.
And between you and me, I think he has bad taste in movies.
And some of his criticisms of the movie I get. I mean, I get where he's coming from, but I think the movie has other redeeming qualities. But yeah, it was bad. If anybody wants a really fun laugh, like go on YouTube because that was an episode we did in video. I don't remember what episode it was, but it was like in the 500s, I think.
I will find it because now I want to watch that.
It was we laughed. That might be the episode that I laughed the most during, just because I couldn't believe he did not like that movie.
James Earl Jones had a great performance in that. I mean, come on, a team is not a team unless you don't give a damn about one another.
I know.
That speech. I mean, come on.
I know. I loved it.
The only character I did not like in that whole show, I can't remember her name now, but the female that they brought in. Sensei, I did not like her. She was the only person who I think was completely out of place in the movie. And like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
But everyone else I loved. I liked Virgil. I liked them all. So
yeah, I had no issues. I had no issues with the movie. I like it. He does not.
All right, cool. Well, speaking of movies, favorite martial arts movie?
Oh gosh. So I worked at a video store for a long time. And I used to tell people, you're not allowed to ask someone that works in a video store what their favorite movie is because they've seen so many. It's just not fair. I would say Best of the Best is up there. And Jeremy, if you're listening, I don't care. I've seen most every martial art, let me take that back. I've not seen every martial arts movie, but from the 80s and 90s, I probably saw them all.
Okay.
A favorite one.
If you can't think of a favorite, what's the one you think you've seen the most?
Without a doubt, it'd be The Karate Kid.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Mine too. So obviously.
Yeah.
That's cool. And speaking of movies, I know we should maybe give a little teaser, a project that me and Andrew have actually been talking about for a few months. And my goal is to do this in July. Finally, we've been talking about it for a long time, and I finally want to do it. I'm going to bring back Andrew, and I'm going to bring back one or two other guests, and the whole topic of the show is going to be cheesy martial arts movies of the 80s. So,
I can't wait to talk about Jim Kata.
I'm just going to say it's going to be movies like Jim Kata, American Ninja. I mean, things like
yep, Michael Dudikoff.
Yes. I don't know if you can get worse than Jim Kata, but we'll decide that. We're gonna narrow it down to like 5, and then we're gonna rank the 5 cheesiest martial arts movies of the 80s. It's gonna be so much fun. So watch for that episode. I'm fingers crossed I can make it work in July. So
coming soon to a computer near you.
That's right. That'll be good. All right, final one. Doesn't have to be a martial arts movie, but favorite movie fight scene.
Okay, so let's see if I can remember the name of it. So this is an oldie.
Okay.
It was a movie. It had 2 different titles. depending on whether you got the Asian version, like the Chinese version of the movie, or you got the American version. I believe the two titles were Shaolin Challenges Ninja or East Meets West, or Hero of the West, maybe? I might have to look it up and send it to you later.
Okay.
And it was about this Japanese woman, a karateka, that was married off to a Chinese, like, noble person. And she, like, moved to China to be with her husband. That was like an arranged marriage type thing, I guess. And she starts practicing her karate in his garden, like punching, statues and things, because he doesn't have any traditional Japanese training, makiwaras or whatever. And he's like, "What are you doing? That's not martial arts." And he starts doing his, kung fu wushu. And she's like, "That's not martial arts. Like, we're Japan and we have the real martial art, blah, 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 blah." And so he says something stupid like, Chinese martial arts is better than anything, and we can beat anybody. And so she sends a letter home, and her family sends over, like, the top martial artists in all the Japanese disciplines to challenge him. And so he has to fight unarmed combat. And so there's a guy doing karate, and he's doing kung fu, and there's, like, a weapons guy. And the coolest one was when he fights with the 3-sectional staff.
Okay.
And I remember seeing this as a kid, and I taught myself the routine that he does in this fight.
That's actually
and so,
cool.
Without a doubt, and I think he was fighting a guy with one nunchaku and one tonfa. Maybe, I think it was one tonfa, or maybe it's just 2 nunchaku.
Okay.
But it was really cool to see the Chinese version counterpart to the Japanese.
Oh, yeah.
Style.
It looks like Gordon Liu was in that movie.
Yeah, it could have been.
I found a hero. It actually had 4 titles: Heroes of the East, also known as Challenge of the Ninja, also known as Shaolin versus Ninja, and also known as Shaolin Challenges Ninja from 1978.
Yep, I remember it as, when I got it at the video store, it was Shaolin Challenges Ninja.
Okay. Yeah, Gordon
Now,
Liu.
make no mistake, the movie as a movie is not very good. I can recognize and admit that, but the fight scenes were really cool to see the different styles of fighting.
Awesome. I will definitely add that to my list and at least fast forward through the fight scenes. So
Yeah.
That'll be good. All right, so anything else we want to mention before I let you go, Andrew? And I'll definitely, like I said, as I did with Jeremy, I'll put links for the podcast and everything, and anything else you want me to put links about. So
No, I don't think so. Like, my biggest thing is train. Even a bad day of training is better than no training at all.
That is true.
And, my current biggest pet peeve is the word McDojo.
Yeah.
I hate it. I hate that word. I don't use the word hate often, Brian. Right. I hate that word.
So you don't like people using it at all, or you don't like what the McDojos are?
I don't like that it is used.
Okay.
And here's why. Here's my philosophy on it. And I think this comes from having trained with so many open-minded instructors. Let's say there is a school in my town that teaches martial art that I don't think is good. Mm-hmm. Okay? That instructor has tons of students. Those students, and this is all hypothetical, I'm not saying, okay, but that instructor has tons of students, and those students are happy training with him or her. Great. They're going to come to the school I train at and not be happy. And and the students that are happy at my school would go to their school and not be happy. Now, the argument that people give when they talk about McDojos is that, oh, but those people aren't really learning anything. Who cares? Oh, but they have a black belt and they're giving us black belts a bad name. No, they're not. The only person that can give your black belt a bad name is you. So don't worry about what other people are doing. And here's the other reality. That person that got their black belt at their quote-unquote McDojo, if they were to get into a real fight, people are like, they're going to get their butt kicked. They're walking around with a false sense of security. Well, maybe that's true. But here's the reality. That person has a black belt. They feel confident. They feel like they can defend themselves. Whether they can or cannot is irrelevant. They are going to walk around as someone who is not going to look like a victim. People that often get attacked, and yes, I'm making a gross generalization, they people who are walking around confidently typically do not get attacked. People, if they're going to get attacked, they're looking for victims. And someone who has a black belt in a, quote, McDojo still feels like they're not a victim. So they're going to walk around more confidently. Ultimately, that is going to help them. Who cares if that black belt can't do what a black belt in my school can do?
That's a good way to look at it.
So that's my thing. I just hate the term McDojo. Just who cares what everyone else is doing? Pay attention to what you're doing.
Perfect way to end it. I like that. It's a good good outlook to have and good advice for people. So Andrew, thank you very much, sir. I've enjoyed this so much, and I can't wait to have you back on and do our cheesy martial arts 80s movies throwdown that we're going to have. We'll have to get that set up soon, but seriously, I appreciate your time. I love your story, and it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Brian, thanks so much. I had a blast. I really appreciate it, and I love what you do.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.